The wind cut through the alley like a sharp knife, its icy touch biting at the skin, and the rain that had started hours ago now hammered against the pavement, turning the world into a blur of grey. In the dim glow of the streetlights, a scruffy dog, its coat matted with mud, sat huddled in the corner. Its once bright eyes were now dull, filled with a hollow emptiness that only those abandoned could understand. The world around him had been a blur for days. The noise of passing cars, the laughter of people who walked by without sparing a glance, the distant howls of other dogs far away. But tonight something felt different. As the rain fell harder, the cold seeping deeper into his bones, he looked up. And in that fleeting moment, there was a flicker of something new, hope. Was it the woman approaching him, her face illuminated by the headlights of a car, or was it the soft, trembling hand she extended toward him? For the first time in what felt like forever, the dog hesitated, unsure. Could this stranger be the one who would see him for what he once was? A companion, a friend, a loved one. Could he trust her after everything? The world around them fell silent as the woman crouched, her breath visible in the chilly air. Slowly, carefully, she extended her hand a little closer. And then, against all odds, the dog took a step forward. It had been days since anyone had acknowledged the dog's presence. The rain had soaked him through, his fur heavy with the weight of forgotten years. He had once been someone's companion, a shadow to his owner, always by their side. But now, the only company he had was the faint, lingering smell of garbage that curled in the wind. He crouched in the corner of the alley, his body hunched, shivering from the cold. His eyes flicked to the passing figures, their heads turned away as if he was invisible. The world didn't care about him anymore. No one ever stopped. The streetlights flickered, casting an eerie glow over the wet pavement. Each raindrop felt like a sharp reminder of the warmth he no longer had. His stomach growled, the emptiness within him gnawing deeper. The streets had become his new home, a place where he could only watch, never participate. The people who once smiled at him now passed by with hurried steps, indifferent to his silent plea for help. It wasn't always this way. There were days when the sky wasn't so gray, when the sun warmed his back and his owner's voice called out to him with love. But that life was gone, and now he was a forgotten thing, a shadow in the dark. But just as he closed his eyes against the weight of his despair, he heard something different. Footsteps, not hurried, but deliberate. A slow, soft sound, almost as if the person was approaching him with care. He raised his head, staring through the rain at the figure of a woman. She was close now, her face barely visible beneath the hood of her jacket, but her presence was unmistakable. Something about her seemed to anchor him, as if, for the first time in days, he wasn't invisible. She knelt in front of him, her breath visible in the chilly night air. Her hand reached out slowly, as though to test whether he was real. For a moment the dog hesitated. Fear clamped around his chest, and the instinct to run surged in his veins. But something in her eyes, the softness, the care, made him pause. It was a brief moment, but it felt like an eternity. And then the dog took a tentative step forward. The woman didn't flinch. Her hand remained steady, palm open, waiting. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet understanding, as if she had seen something in him that no one else had bothered to see. The dog edged closer, his body stiff, his muscles ready to spring at any moment. He had been betrayed before by people he once trusted, by the ones who had promised to keep him safe. The memories burned in his mind, each one sharper than the last. It was hard to imagine that anyone would ever want to help him again. But there she was, her hand close, the warmth radiating from her skin. She smelled faintly of lavender, of something clean and soft. He could hear her breathing, slow and measured, as if she, too, was unsure of what this moment would mean. "I won't hurt you," she whispered, her voice trembling with something he couldn't name. "I won't hurt you." The words broke through the walls he had built around himself. Slowly, carefully, he stepped forward again, until his nose brushed against her palm. He flinched, but her touch was gentle, almost apologetic. Her fingers traced the roughness of his coat, the matted fur that had become his only protection. The dog closed his eyes, feeling the warmth spread through his body. He didn't trust her yet, but in this moment, He allowed himself to feel something else. He allowed himself to feel seen. She didn't speak again. She just stayed there, her hand on his back, grounding him to the present. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the dog allowed himself to believe that this could be the beginning of something new. The car door creaked open, the warmth of the interior spilling into the night, but the dog hesitated. His paws were wet, his fur heavy with the chill, and yet the air inside the car was like an invitation to something he had forgotten: safety, comfort, a place to call home again. The woman looked at him, her eyes soft, but there was an urgency now. The rain had picked up, and the cold seemed to press harder, suffocating them both. Her gaze softened when she saw the way he trembled, the uncertainty still gripping him. She gently patted the seat next to her, a quiet, unspoken invitation. He took a cautious step forward. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but to him it felt monumental. Each step away from the street, from the rain-soaked corner he had called home, was like walking through an invisible barrier. He was terrified, yet at the same time, there was something pulling him forward. A flicker of hope, or maybe a desperate need to believe he could trust again. With a small, hesitant whine, he took another step, his paws slipping slightly on the wet pavement as he slowly crawled into the car. The woman's breath caught in her chest as she watched him, the vulnerability in his eyes mirroring the same hesitation she had felt when she first found him. She closed the door gently, the sound like a finality. They were both in this together now. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the alley behind. The place where the dog had been forgotten, now nothing more than a distant memory. The streetlights flickered and vanished in the rearview mirror as they drove into the unknown. The woman's hand rested on the dog's back, her fingers lightly stroking his fur. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. But she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. The dog lay down on the seat, his body stiff with tension, but also with the relief of knowing he wasn't alone anymore. He was no longer just a stray on the street. For the first time in what felt like years, he allowed himself to rest, the steady hum of the engine lulling him into a fragile peace. The woman's house smelled like cinnamon and fresh linen, a stark contrast to the damp, cold streets. The door clicked shut behind them, and the world outside felt distant, almost unreal. Inside, there was warmth, both in the air and the quiet way the woman moved, as if she was careful not to startle him, not to rush him. The dog stood by the door, unsure of what to do next. His body ached with the remnants of hunger and the exhaustion of survival. The woman, sensing his hesitation, knelt in front of him, her hands moving gently toward the collar around his neck. He flinched at the touch, his instinct to retreat kicking in. But she didn't pull back. She spoke to him softly, her voice a steady whisper, as though she were speaking to a child, or maybe to herself. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, two creatures both scarred by the world in different ways, both longing for something they couldn't name. Then the woman reached out and, with careful fingers, untangled the collar from his neck. It had been a symbol of ownership, of responsibility, but now it felt like a shackle, a reminder of everything he had lost. The woman discarded it, her hands trembling slightly as she did. The dog blinked, his gaze drifting to the food she placed in front of him. He sniffed it cautiously, unsure whether to believe it was really for him. His stomach growled again, louder this time, but he didn't immediately dive in. There was hesitation still. After all, what if it was another trap? But as he stood there, his eyes meeting hers, something shifted. He looked at the food again, then back at her. She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if telling him that it was okay to eat, that he wasn't being watched, that there was no need to be on guard. And so, with trembling paws and an uncertain heart, the dog began to eat. The first bite was small, almost tentative, but then, as the hunger overtook him, he ate with a newfound urgency, savoring each moment, each taste, as though this simple act of nourishment had become a quiet victory. She watched him, her own heart heavy with emotions she hadn't fully understood. It was more than just feeding him. It was the act of providing something, anything, that made her feel like she could still make a difference in this world, that maybe, Just maybe healing was possible for both of them. The days passed in a quiet, almost unspoken rhythm. The dog, once frail and fearful, began to transform before her eyes. His coat, once matted and tangled, started to shine with health, his eyes regaining their light, the warmth of his spirit slowly returning. He still flinched at sudden movements, still shied away from loud noises, but with each passing day he grew stronger, more trusting. And as he healed, so did she. The silence between them had become comfortable, filled with the small gestures that spoke louder than words. The gentle brush of his fur against her leg as he followed her through the house, the way he lay by her side at night, his body warm against hers. The dog had begun to leave his mark on her life, in ways she hadn't anticipated. She found herself laughing more, enjoying the simple things again. The soft brush of his tail against her leg, the sound of his paws on the hardwood floors, the joy in his eyes when she returned from work. He had brought something back into her life she hadn't realized she had lost connection. One evening, as they sat together by the window watching the rain fall outside, the dog leaned against her, his head resting in her lap. She stroked his fur gently, her fingers running through the soft strands, her heart full. The world outside had grown cold again, the sky dark and overcast, but inside it felt warm, safe, as though they had both found what they were searching for. And as the woman gazed down at the dog, the bond between them unspoken but undeniable, she realized something. The love she thought was long lost had come back, not in the form of a person, but in the form of this once abandoned dog who now stood by her side. The dog raised his head, meeting her gaze, and for the first time in a long time, she saw not just a creature that had been rescued, but one that had rescued her too. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the world felt different, warmer, and for both of them that was enough. The dog had made his way into the deepest corners of her heart, as much a part of the fabric of her life as the air she breathed. He had gone from being a trembling, broken creature on the streets to a steady presence, a quiet companion who had transformed their shared world into something richer, more meaningful. Days bled into weeks, and with each passing moment their connection deepened. The dog's trust in her grew, his eyes bright with unspoken gratitude whenever she looked at him. And she, in turn, began to heal in ways she hadn't expected. She realized that it wasn't just about saving the dog, it was about saving herself too. One cold morning, she stood by the window, watching as the first light of dawn broke through the thick clouds, casting soft rays on the wet pavement outside. The dog, now fully restored, sat at her feet, his head resting against her leg. The rain from the previous night had left everything washed clean, as if the world had been given a fresh start. "Look at us," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "We're both starting over, aren't we?" He shifted his weight, looking up at her with those now familiar eyes, eyes that had once been empty, filled only with fear and uncertainty, but now held a quiet knowing. The softness in his gaze was a silent response, the kind that spoke volumes without saying a word. They had found something precious in each other, an unexpected love, forged from shared pain and silent promises. The woman reached down and scratched behind his ears, the motion gentle, familiar. Her fingers had become attuned to the soft waves of fur, the steady pulse beneath his skin. She had come to know him so well, his needs, his fears, his joys. But what struck her most was the unspoken bond they shared now, one built on the deepest kind of trust. "I don't need to be fixed," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly as she looked out at the rain-soaked world. "But you needed someone to care. Someone to show you that you were worth something." The dog, as if understanding the weight of her words, nudged her hand with his nose, his breath warm against her skin. It was his way of saying, "I know." The warmth of their shared silence enveloped them both, the kind of quiet that spoke volumes. In that moment, she realized that the healing they had both undergone wasn't just about being saved from the past. It was about the future they were building together, one step at a time. A future that no longer felt lonely, uncertain, or cold. She knelt beside him, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him close. The dog leaned into her, his soft, familiar weight a reminder of how far they had come. From the cold, empty streets to the warmth of a shared home, They had built something real. Not a rescue, but a partnership, a mutual understanding that they would never again be alone in this vast, unpredictable world. As they sat together, bathed in the soft light of the morning, the woman knew that this was what it meant to truly heal. Not to forget, not to erase the pain, but to find solace in the company of another soul who understood. They didn't need words. They didn't need explanations. They just needed each other. And as the dog curled up at her feet, the sound of his steady breathing blending with the rhythm of the rain outside, she felt a quiet peace settle within her heart. The seasons began to change, shifting from the soft embrace of spring to the fiery warmth of summer. The rain, once a constant companion in their shared journey, now came less frequently, leaving the streets drier and the air thick with the scent of freshly mown grass. The world outside the woman's window was alive with color and sound, but inside it was still. Still in the best way possible. The dog, whose once aching limbs now moved with youthful energy, had begun to find his place in the world again. His once guarded movements had softened. He no longer hid in the shadows of the house or flinched when footsteps approached. The deep, persistent fear that had once defined him was gradually replaced with something more confident, trust. And so, they lived in this rhythm. The woman would rise each morning with a sense of purpose, walking through her day, knowing she had something to come home to, something that waited for her with unspoken affection. And the dog, no longer a creature of the streets, but a part of her life, followed her wherever she went. Whether it was the quiet mornings spent in the kitchen or the lazy afternoons by the window, he was there, a steady presence by her side. She had learned to appreciate the little moments, the brief exchange of glances, the shared quiet. She began to see life through his eyes, learning to find beauty in the simplest things. Like the way sunlight streamed through the window and warmed the wood floor, or the way the dog's tail wagged, sweeping across the floor when he was content. But there were still moments when the past would come rushing back, when the streetlights would flicker in the distance, or the sound of a passing car would remind her of the desperation that once clung to him like a shadow. There were times when the memories of how he had been discarded, left behind, forgotten, would come crashing into her mind. Yet those memories didn't haunt her. They didn't weigh her down. Instead, they reminded her of how far they had come, of the quiet miracles they had witnessed in each other. They were both survivors, both living proof that even the most broken of beginnings could lead to something beautiful. One evening, as they sat together, side by side, watching the setting sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, the woman felt a quiet tug at her heart. She looked down at the dog, his eyes reflecting the fading light of the day, and smiled softly. He nudged her gently with his nose, as if sensing the shift within her. The quiet recognition that their journey wasn't just about survival. It was about finding joy in the little things, in the ordinary moments that made life worth living. She reached down and scratched his head, just as she had done 1,000 times before, and whispered softly, "You're home now. You're never going to be alone again." The dog responded with a soft bark, his tail thumping on the floor. It was a sound of joy, of contentment, and for a fleeting moment, everything in the world felt perfectly right. The woman settled back against the couch, the dog curling up beside her, his head resting in her lap. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the peace of the evening wash over her. The sound of the dog's breathing, steady and calm, was a lullaby in the quiet room. The past was behind them, but its lessons remained, that love, compassion, and second chances were powerful forces. The world outside continued to move. People came and went, the seasons turned, but in this small space they had created something lasting, something real. And as the first star appeared in the sky, just beyond the window, the woman realized that this was more than just a story of rescue. It was a story of healing, of two souls finding each other when the world had nearly forgotten them. In the stillness of that night, with the rain beginning to fall again outside, the dog's soft breaths filled the silence. Together they were whole. The dog's fur had grown thick and shiny now, no longer a patchwork of dirt and neglect. His eyes, once clouded with fear, now glimmered with understanding. In the mornings, he no longer hid in the shadows. Instead, he greeted her with a quiet whine at the foot of the bed, waiting patiently until she woke. His tail wagged steadily. His excitement so pure it felt like the most beautiful thing in the world. A reminder of everything they had built together. The woman had long ago stopped seeing him as the abandoned soul she had found in the rain. She saw him as her companion, her partner in life, in a way she hadn't known she needed. He had become her constant, the quiet one who simply sat beside her when words were too much, the one who nuzzled her when the weight of the world became too heavy. But there were still days, like today, when the world outside seemed too loud, too fast. She had felt it on the way home, the rush of people on the street, the noise of the traffic. And then the moment she opened her door, the moment her eyes met the dog's steady gaze, the noise faded. The chaos dissolved. She set down her bag, not needing to say a word. The dog, as if reading her, padded over to her feet and sat down, resting his head in her lap. She stroked his fur absently, her fingers tangled in the softness of it, grounding herself in the quiet of their space. She looked out the window, the city bustling, the lights flickering against the dark sky. But in this room, everything was still. Her heart swelled with a quiet gratitude. She had thought once that she was too broken to heal, that she couldn't find peace again, but she had found it in the most unlikely place with him. The dog had saved her not by any grand gesture, but by simply being there, day in and day out, offering his quiet presence as a reminder of what love could truly be. Love wasn't always loud, it wasn't always flashy. Sometimes it was just this, a quiet dog lying beside you, waiting for you to feel safe again. The rain began to fall again, the soft pattering against the window lulling them both into a state of perfect stillness. And in that stillness, the woman realized that they were both pieces of the same puzzle. Broken, perhaps, but not beyond repair. Each of them had their wounds, their pasts they couldn't undo. But in each other, they had found something stronger than just healing. They had found home. As the dog's breathing slowed and the room darkened with the fall of night, she thought about all that had led to this moment. She thought about the streets, about how hopeless the world had seemed when she first found him, how desperate they both had been, each carrying burdens they couldn't share with anyone else. But somehow they had found each other. And that was enough. "Thank you," she whispered, not expecting a response. She never did any more. But he responded all the same, with the softest wag of his tail, the slow, comforting warmth of his body pressed against hers. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the gentle sound of rain, she realized that the journey was never just about finding him. It was about finding herself again, about discovering that love was never truly lost, only hidden beneath the weight of time and pain. And so, with the night stretching out ahead of them, the woman rested her hand on his head. Feeling the steady rhythm of his breath, she knew, deep down, that the life they had built together was the only one she had ever truly wanted. A life filled with quiet moments, love unspoken, and the soft reminder that no matter what the world outside threw at them, they would always have this, each other. And as the world outside raged on, they sat together in the peace they had earned, knowing that no matter how much time passed, they would never be alone again. The days bled together now in a haze of comfort, each one seamlessly merging into the next. The house had become a home, and the dog, who had once been a shell of fear and abandonment, was now a testament to resilience. His movements were no longer slow and hesitant, but confident, eager, his body practically brimming with energy. There was a joy in him now that shone brighter than any surface change could explain. The woman, too, had transformed. She no longer looked over her shoulder, as if expecting the weight of her past to catch up with her. Each morning, she woke with purpose, her thoughts no longer burdened by the ache of loneliness. The house was no longer just a space, it was a place where both she and the dog could find peace, freedom, and healing, together. But the world outside still held its chaos. She noticed it more now than ever before. People rushed by, always in a hurry, always pushing against time, trying to outrun their own fears. It was in their expressions, in their hurried steps, in the constant noise that filled the streets. It reminded her of who she had been before, of the weight she carried, of how easy it was to get lost in the noise. One morning, as she stood by the window watching the world rush past, she felt a familiar tug at her heart. The dog, ever the sensitive soul, came to sit beside her, his body close enough that their sides touched. He looked up at her, his deep eyes as quiet as the rain that began to fall again outside. For a moment, she forgot the noise of the world. She forgot the rush of time. She closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of the rain and the earth beneath her feet. With the dog at her side, everything felt still, safe. She had always been so afraid of being forgotten, of being swallowed by the world. But in this small house, with the dog resting beside her, she knew she was seen. She was heard. And together, they had forged something that no amount of chaos outside could touch. But as the world shifted, she began to notice something else. The space between them was no longer just filled with silence. The dog's playfulness, his little bursts of energy, had become contagious. He would nudge her gently, as if urging her to step outside, to embrace the world that still existed beyond their quiet haven, and she began to listen. They started to take small walks together in the mornings. The dog, no longer just a rescued animal but her companion, trotted beside her with enthusiasm, his tail wagging like a flag of freedom. She had once dreaded the outside world, filled with its judgments and noise, but with him by her side, it felt different. She felt different. There was a new lightness to her steps, a new rhythm to her days. She had found a balance between the stillness of their shared space and the world outside, no longer afraid to step into it with her loyal friend by her side. And the dog, who had once wandered aimlessly through the streets, forgotten and abandoned, now walked with a sense of purpose. His steps were sure and full of life. One afternoon, after their walk, as they returned to the house, she watched the dog playfully chase his tail, his energy infectious. She couldn't help but laugh, the sound feeling like a foreign but welcome thing. It had been so long since she had laughed without hesitation. "You've come so far," she whispered, looking down at him, her voice full of wonder and love. He paused, as if he understood, his gaze meeting hers, and in that moment, she realized they had both come so far. They had traveled the distance from brokenness to wholeness, not in leaps and bounds, but in small, steady steps. And so, with each day that passed, they built something new. A life not defined by the past, but by the quiet strength they had found in each other. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the house, the woman sat on the porch, her hand resting on the dog's head, feeling the warmth of his body pressed against hers. The night air was cool, but the warmth between them was all that was needed. The world could wait. For now, this moment, this peace was enough. As the seasons changed once more, so did the world around them. The days grew longer, the sun warmer, and with each new morning, the woman felt a renewed sense of purpose. Life had a way of continuing, no matter how much we wished it would pause. But now, it seemed to hold a different meaning for her. The chaotic world that once overwhelmed her no longer felt like an enemy. It was simply another part of her journey. The dog, whose coat had transformed into a lush, healthy shine, remained at her side like a constant, unshakable presence. His once guarded nature had melted into playful affection, a reflection of the peace she now found within herself. Every day, they ventured into the world together. They went for walks in the park, sat quietly by the lakeside, and shared moments of stillness in the mornings that were more fulfilling than any rush of excitement could ever be. She began to notice that people around them seemed to change when they saw the dog. Perhaps it was the way he looked at the world, full of curiosity and wonder, or how he seemed to bring an unspoken calm to anyone who came near. Children would run to pet him, laughing with joy as his tail wagged, his eyes glowing with a gentle kind of happiness that was contagious. The woman had never realized how much of herself she had been holding back. She had always lived in fear of being vulnerable, of allowing herself to truly be seen. But with the dog, everything was different. She had learned to trust again, not just in others, but in herself. She had learned to open her heart, slowly, piece by piece. And now the world seemed like a place where kindness wasn't just rare, it was all around her. It wasn't just the outside world that had changed. Her own home had become a sanctuary of warmth and belonging. Their routine had grown into a comforting rhythm. Mornings filled with the smell of fresh coffee, the sound of paws padding across the floor, and evenings where they curled up together on the couch, sharing a peace that didn't need to be spoken. The quiet understanding they shared, the deep, unshakable bond of two souls that had rescued one another, was a legacy of love. But even as life seemed to settle into its comfortable rhythm, the woman knew that there was still much to give. She hadn't simply healed for herself, she had healed for others too. The dog had shown her the quiet power of connection, and now she felt a deep desire to give back, to share the love that had been so freely given to her. She began volunteering at local shelters, offering her time to care for the animals that had once been like the dog, abandoned, forgotten, left to fend for themselves. Each time she stepped into the shelter, the woman felt a quiet determination in her heart. She could offer what she had learned, that love didn't come with conditions, that healing was possible for anyone, no matter their past. It wasn't about rescuing a single animal, it was about changing the world for the better, one small act at a time. The dog, of course, was by her side, his calm presence a soothing balm for the anxious animals that often came into the shelter. He seemed to understand, in his own way, that this was part of their journey, that love was meant to be shared, that healing was a communal act. And as the dog lay at her feet during each visit, offering his silent companionship, the woman felt a deep sense of peace. She was not alone in this world, and neither were the animals she cared for. Years passed, as they always do, but the bond between the woman and the dog only grew stronger. He was no longer the fragile, abandoned creature who had wandered the streets alone. He had become her protector, her companion, her guide, the one who had seen her through some of the most difficult moments of her life. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, and had emerged from each one stronger than before. The woman had learned the art of patience, of compassion, and of unconditional love, and the dog, whose loyalty had never wavered, had taught her that sometimes the most beautiful moments in life are the quiet ones, the ones where nothing is asked and everything is given freely. Now, as the woman sat in the garden of her home, the dog by her side, she could reflect on the life they had built together. The garden, once barren and forgotten, was now lush and full of life, just like their journey had been. The flowers bloomed with a vibrancy that mirrored the light in her heart, and the air was thick with the sweet scent of new beginnings. The dog rested peacefully, his head in her lap, as if to say that there was nothing more they needed. As she stroked his fur, she smiled softly, a quiet gratitude filling her chest. She knew their story wasn't finished yet, that there was still more life to live, more lessons to be learned. But she also knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together, just as they always had. The dog had given her more than she could have ever imagined. Not just a second chance at love and healing, but a lesson in what it meant to truly live. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the garden, the woman leaned back against the bench, her heart full, her spirit at peace. The dog looked up at her with his soft eyes, and for the briefest moment, it felt as if time had stopped, as if everything had come full circle. They had found their place in the world together. In the quiet of the evening, with the dog resting by her side, the woman realized that the greatest gift of all had been the love they had shared. It was simple, it was quiet, but it was enough. And with that thought in her heart, she let out a soft sigh, feeling more whole than she had ever felt before. As the days stretched into years, the woman and the dog continued their simple, yet profound journey together. Life had become a rhythm, one she no longer feared, but embraced. With each passing year, the seasons came and went, but the love they shared only deepened. It wasn't marked by grand gestures or dramatic moments, it was in the quiet acts. The touch of her hand on his head, the soft murmur of her voice when she spoke his name, the way he always knew when she needed him close. The dog had grown old now, his coat graying, his steps a little slower, but his spirit was as vibrant as ever. He was still the same dog who had once wandered the streets, uncertain and abandoned, but now, his eyes shone with the wisdom of everything they had both survived. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, The woman sat in her favorite chair by the window, the dog resting at her feet, his head resting on her lap. The room was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall and the gentle hum of the evening breeze outside. The woman ran her fingers through the dog's fur, the rhythm soothing, grounding her in this peaceful moment. She didn't need to look outside to know that the world was still turning, still moving at its frantic pace, filled with chaos and noise. But inside, in the quiet of their home, the world was exactly as it should be. The dog raised his head for a moment, his gaze meeting hers, and in that silent exchange they understood. They had both found what they were meant to find. Healing, peace, a home, not just in a place, but in each other. She smiled softly, the weight of the years lifting from her shoulders. She had once feared being alone, but now she realized that she had never truly been alone. She had always had him, the one who had stayed by her side, who had taught her what it meant to truly love and be loved. And as the evening settled around them, with the last light of the day fading into night, the woman knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Their journey had come full circle, not because it had been easy, but because they had walked it side by side every step of the way. She whispered softly to the dog, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for everything." And with that, the two of them sat in the quiet, knowing that this was enough. It had always been enough.